This lesson covers multiplying and dividing rationals. You may want to stop the video and go ahead and copy these specific terms. These terms will show up a lot in these kinds of problems. Simplifying just means to write into lowest terms. A product is the result of a multiplication problem. A quotient is the result of a division problem. Equivalent expressions are things that may look different, but they're actually equal, like a problem that you may start off with that says to multiply, and then you end up reducing to a simpler form. The start of the problem and the end of the problem are equivalent. And then fractions have a numerator on top and a denominator on bottom. Just a quick refresher. If you are simplifying a fraction, you would like to break that fraction into the factors. And so you want to know what the largest thing that goes into 16 and 24 are, and you want to break it down into those factors. So we know that both 16 and 24 are divisible by 8. So I know 16 is the same thing as 8 times 2. And I know 8 times 3 is the same thing as 24. So next, I can divide out common factors. So 8 divided by 8 is 1. And then what do I have left? The 2/3. And that is your final answer. When you are finding a product, which means we are multiplying these fractions, you can actually do the same thing. You can break these numbers into their factors and then start dividing out common factors. You could also multiply straight across and get that answer and then reduce. So go ahead, break these into their common factors, cancel out the common factors or divide out the common factors, and then reduce. This may be what you broke each one of these into. 15 is 5 times 3, 10 is 5 times 2, 28 is 7 times 4, and 35 is 7 times 5. So now it's time to cancel common factors. When you cancel, or divide, you can divide common factors up and down or diagonally, not horizontally. So when we start to divide our common factors, we know 5 divided by 5 is 1. The 7s will not divide out. This 2 will go into this 4 2 times. And I think everything is simplified. So now multiply straight across. So 5 times 3 is 15. 7 times 7 is 49, and 49 times 2 is 98. And that is simplest form. Now let's look at this problem. Find the quotient, and it gives you this fraction divided by this fraction. So you learned a long time ago, when you are dividing fractions, you keep your first fraction, you change your division to multiplication, and then we need to write the reciprocal of this one. So we used to say keep, change, flip. So go ahead and flip that over, and then go ahead and reduce like we did over here. I've broken down these numbers into some of their factors. Technically, you do not have to do that, but I'm setting it up this way to show you what's going to happen on the problems that we're about to do. So you want to break things down. I could actually break this 4 down into a 2 times 2, which would not be a bad idea. I was thinking about that on the other problem that I just did. So you could actually break that further into a 2 and a 2 so that you don't have to think about that 4 anymore. But now it's time to start dividing out common factors. I'm going to start with the variables. Remember, you can divide out the common factors diagonally or up and down, but not across. I can see here that the m's will cancel each other out or divide to be a 1. The n's, so this n and one of these, but down here I see another n. So those n's will divide out. And now I can go to the numbers. I have no variables left, by the way. So I'm looking, I know that 2 can go into this 6, which I could have broken down into 2 times 3, but I know 2 goes into 6 3 times. Could have broken this 6 down into 2 times 3, but canceled the 2 with this 6, and there will be a 3 left. I can cancel this 2 with this 2, and we can multiply straight across. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. Over 7 times 7 is 49. So your final answer is 27 over 49. If that seems complicated to you, you could have multiplied everything in the original problem straight across and then reduced those answers. But the numbers are really huge, and so it seems simpler to me to break these numbers into common factors and then divide out the common factors. But anyway, this is going to make more sense to you, and you'll see why I was doing that on these next problems. So here is a rational function, and notice in the directions it says simplify. So when it says to simplify, you need to factor. So back to factoring. So I want you to stop the video. I would like for you to factor the numerator and then factor the denominator and then cancel or divide out common factors. I wanted to point out real quick, something that tends to happen is students forget about factoring out a GCF. In the denominator, both terms have an x, so you should factor out the x. And then another common mistake is to think that you're finished factoring here, but this is a difference of squares, so you need to factor that further into x minus 2, x plus 2. So the numerator factors into x plus 18, x plus 2. I know 18 times 2 is 36, and 18 plus 2 is 20. So that's how I figured that out. And then the denominator factors into x parentheses, x minus 2, x plus 2. So now here we go, dividing out common factors. And so the final answer would be x plus 18 over x times x minus 2. But we need to start listing restrictions. Notice how it says identify any restrictions. In a fraction, you never want the denominator to equal 0. So anything that causes the denominator to equal a 0, you need to say x cannot be that number. You want to go to the original factors of the denominator before you canceled anything out. So I'm looking at each one of these factors, and if x were 0, this whole denominator would be 0. If this x were a 2, 2 minus 2 would cause this to be a 0. And if this x were a negative 2, negative 2 plus 2 would cause this parenthesis to be a 0. And any time you multiply by 0, you're going to have a 0. So we're going to say x cannot be 0, 2, or negative 2. Basically, set each one of these equal to 0 and solve, and you can find your restrictions. In this problem, we are multiplying, but I wanted to show you the different ways they could ask you to do that. They could say multiply, they could say find the product, they could say perform the indicated operation, or they could say find the equivalent expression. So on these problems, you should factor each part first, then divide out common factors, write your final answer with the restrictions. So stop the video and I would like you to factor each one of these pieces and then come back. So hopefully these are the factors you got when you factored each one of these pieces. And now it's time to divide out common factors. So we're going to divide out x plus 5 with an x plus 5, an x plus 2 with another x plus 2, a 2 with a 4, and there will be a 2 left. And now you want to write your final answer with restrictions. So x minus 2 would be in the numerator, x minus 5, x minus 2, and a 2 would be in the denominator. And you want to look at all of the terms in or factors in your denominator all the way across in the original problem to write your restrictions. So this you would not want this to be a negative 5, you would not want that to be a positive 5, you would not want that to be a 2, and you would not want that x to be a negative 2. So in this problem, we are doing a division problem. So they could say divide, find the quotient, perform the indicated operation, or find the equivalent expression. So you want to, if it's a division problem, you want to do keep it, change it, flip it, keep the first fraction, change division to multiplication, write the reciprocal of your second fraction. Once you've done that, you want to factor, divide out common factors, and then when you write your answer, also write your restrictions. So stop the video and go ahead and get as far as you can. So here's what the problem looks like now that you've changed it to a multiplication problem. And then you should start factoring. Don't forget to take out a GCF. So this one requires taking out a 3, and you have an x squared minus 9 left. But notice how this is a difference of squares. So it could be broken down into 3 parentheses x minus 3, x plus 3. The x squared minus 2x minus 3 is factored into x minus 3, x plus 1. You can take out a GCF here. It becomes 2 parentheses x plus 1. And now it's time to divide out common factors. So we know those are in common. We know this is in common. The 2 and the 6 are in common, and 2 goes into 6, 3. This 3 and this 3 are in common. And it looks like there's only an x squared in the numerator and an x plus 3 in the denominator for our simplified answer. But don't forget about the original factors in the denominator, because that will help you write your restrictions. So your final answer is x squared over x plus 3. Your restrictions are 3. Because of this x minus 3 here, we would not want that x to be a 3. Negative 3, because of this, we would not want that x to be a negative 3. And then right here, you would not want that x to be a negative 1. So final problem, if the question said, find the volume. Volume of a cube is length times width times height. So we would want to take all of our dimensions and multiply them together. So stop the video, factor each piece, and then start dividing out common factors to get your final answer. And here is what it looks like when you do all your factoring. And now let's start dividing out common factors. X plus 6 and x plus 6, x minus 6, x minus 6, this x plus 6 with this x plus 6, x minus 20 and x minus 20. So now, if you have not made it this far, go ahead and write the final answer with all of the restrictions. And here's your final answer. We took the x plus 1 and the x from the numerator x minus 1, 2x minus 3 from the denominator to write our simplified answer. And then we needed to go look at all of our factors to write our restrictions. So these are the same. Both of those, we would not want the x to be a 6. Here, we would not want x to be 20. We would not want x for this one to be a 1. And for this one, we wouldn't want x to be a positive 3/2. And then x plus 6, for that x, we would not want it to be a negative 6. So those would be our restrictions.